got a big piece. Some of you said, hey, how come you haven't been writing as much at OutKick? Well, the book, right? The book takes a lot of time and energy and effort to put together and get it ready for you to all be able to get it. I think the book is 293 pages. It's not an insubstantial work, all right? I also, by the way, if you're out there and you listen to shows or you watch shows and you're not a huge reader, I recorded the entire audiobook. All 10 hours, I read every word myself of this book. 10 hours. 10 hours it took me to record everything. Maybe you're out on the road a lot. Maybe you're going on a vacation, long flight. You enjoy listening to audiobooks. My voice, reading every word. Again, it's available everywhere, certainly online. You can hear me read everything. But I'm going to be writing more at OutKick now that this book is getting ready to come out. And I wrote a long-form piece arguing that the NBA was actually the first version of Bud Light. And somebody say, okay, what do you mean by that, Clay? Well, there was a decision made in what I believe is the left-wing sports media that they didn't want to acknowledge that being left-wing and political and woke was an incredible hit on the overall NBA brand. And I shared all the data. I would encourage you to read it at OutKick. All the data on ratings over the last 30 years. 4 of the 5 lowest rated NBA finals from the last 30 years have occurred in the past 4 years. Okay? Let me repeat that. 4 of the lowest 5 rated NBA finals in the last 30 years have occurred in the last 4 years. The most watched NBA game of all time actually happened 25 years ago. 1998, Game 6 of the NBA Finals. I bet a lot of you listening and watching me right now were watching that game. Michael Jordan maybe pushes off against Brian Russell, steps back, drains a jumper to win a 6th title for the Chicago Bulls. Over 35 million people watched that game. It is the single most watched basketball game in the history of the United States. By 2020, 80% of the NBA audience for the NBA Finals was gone. All of these years, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, the audience that's watching the NBA Finals is a pinprick of the audience that was watching in the Jordan era and even in much of the Kobe Bryant era. What's happened? And why are so many of you not aware of what this data reflects? Everybody knows that Bud Light has lost 30% of its audience. I just told you that from 1998 to 2020, the NBA Finals lost 80% of their audience. And they've continued to lose massive amounts of audience over the last 4 years because they have embraced woke, left-wing politics. Michael Jordan, my last book was a Michael Jordan quote, "Republicans buy sneakers too." That was what Jordan said when he was asked why he didn't get political. Republicans don't just buy sneakers. They like basketball too. A lot of people out there, they want to say, well, the audiences aren't as big for sports as they used to be. That's not true. Actually, the audiences are bigger. Did you know that there are 50 million more people in America today than lived in America in 1998? Think about how wild that is. 50 million more people. The audience is substantially more and greater than it was in 1998. The Super Bowl, which was just played in February between the Eagles and the Chiefs, most watched football game ever. Never have more people watched a football game. 115.1 million people watched the Super Bowl. Okay? Biggest football audience ever. Way more people watched the Super Bowl today than watched the Super Bowl back in 1998 and 1999. The NFL has grown its Super Bowl audience massively over the last 30 years. What's happened that the NBA hasn't? Well, some of you are like, well, it's streaming, it's basketball. I'm going to have to raise my chair, by the way. I don't know what happened here. I keep sinking. This is unbelievable. Hold on a second. A lot of you are saying, hey, what's going on? That's just basketball. Nobody watches basketball like they used to watch it. It's not true, actually. Data doesn't reflect that's true at all. In fact, the most watched women's college basketball game of all time just aired this year, LSU against Iowa. And the most watched opening rounds of the NCAA tournament ever for men's basketball just happened. So you've got men's college basketball, women's college basketball, setting all-time record highs for viewership, and the NBA is setting all-time record lows. What's going on? If people love basketball, and if people love football, why are those sports setting all-time records while the NBA finals are tanking? Why is the NBA 4 of the last 5 years, worst ever in the last 30 years, happen? It's because they went woke. Adam Silver took over from David Stern. LeBron James took over from Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. And the combination of Adam Silver and LeBron James destroyed what Michael Jordan and David Stern built. The NBA used to like its fans. You remember NBA action? It's fantastic. Then what has happened? How often do you see stories about fans now? What they do is actually demand that fans get kicked out of arenas. We've had a big discussion about this because I've been saying for some time, you can't tell me that people are meaner in the crowd today than they were all the way back in 1988, right? I just don't buy that that's true. Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Karl Malone, John Stockton, that entire era, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, they all wanted you to like basketball. They were selling the NBA as an iconic, must-see brand, and it worked. It was great. Patrick Ewing, Reggie Miller. The NBA of the 90s, they've never come close to recapturing that audience. Want a wild stat? More people watched a documentary about the 1998 Chicago Bulls than watched the actual NBA Finals in 2020. Think about that for a minute. People would rather watch a documentary about Michael Jordan than LeBron James actually playing in real games for a championship. Why hasn't this story been told? I encourage you to go read it. It's a long-form piece from me. Why hasn't the media told you the data on viewership in the NBA? I will submit it's because they don't want to acknowledge the power that conservative sports fans actually have. They don't want to acknowledge all these callers that I was getting. This is how I became aware that this was a real phenomenon. When I was doing OutKick the coverage, my morning sports talk show, we would open up phone lines. People would overwhelmingly call in and say, I'm disgusted by what I've seen. And so I stopped watching and decided to do something else. The NBA brand, I think really starting with the Trump era, collapsed. And you can even go trace it to when Adam Silver made the decision to move the All-Star game out of Charlotte. I think that was a really consequential moment. Do you remember that? When Adam Silver said, we're not going to play the All-Star game in Charlotte, North Carolina because of a transgender bathroom bill there. And then that opened the door for all the hypocrisy attacks. Because people said, wait a minute, the NBA is playing games in China. The NBA is playing games in the Middle East. The NBA is playing games in Mexico. They've got way more restrictive laws in those places than North Carolina does. And that's why what's going on right now, you can't miss it. Adam Silver is default telling you that everything I'm saying is true. How and what do I mean exactly by that? 1993 was the most watched NBA All-Star game of all time. 22 million people watched. played in Salt Lake City. This past year, 30 years later, Salt Lake City hosts the NBA All-Star Game again. And Salt Lake City is a part of Utah, which recently passed a couple of different laws. All right? What do those laws say? Those laws said that there was not going to be any under 18 gender transition medical coverage allowed in Utah. Makes sense, right? You can't get a tattoo until you're a minor, until you're of age, right? Until you're over 18. Why should you be able to cut off your breast? Why should you be able to stop from having your puberty blockers? Well, all these things are crazy, right? What actually happened? They also said, hey, you're going to play in sports against the gender on your birth certificate. And I want to make sure I read this quote right. They asked Adam Silver about that. They said, wait a minute, you pulled the All-Star Game out of North Carolina over a transgender bathroom bill. Why in the world are you not reacting to what's going on in Utah? And Adam Silver said, hey, this is significant. I want to read this quote. In North Carolina, this is Adam Silver, NBA commissioner, we were working directly with the team there, and it appeared to us there was an opportunity to have a direct impact on that law, meeting with and working with the larger business community. Our initial view working with the Utah Jazz is we're going to have to find a way to work in that environment and to create an inclusive environment for our game rather than take the position that we have somehow an independent ability to change the minds of the voters of Utah. So the NBA is attempting to, this woke ideology that led them to pull the All-Star Game out of Charlotte. But they're not directly apologizing to fans for what they did. Again, go read the piece. The data is irrefutable. In the Trump era, as the NBA embraced woke politics, remember they put education reform and say her name and respect us, all these different crazy things on the back of jerseys in 2020. Remember they refused to play with Jacob Blake. They refused to play a playoff game. Black Lives Matter emblazoned on the court. Make no mistake, what exactly happened? The NBA embraced woke politics. LeBron James and Adam Silver led the NBA right off a cliff. The data reflects it. It's impossible to miss. Go read it. Go think about it. And contemplate why I'm pretty much the only person saying this and why OutKick is pretty much the only media company that will discuss this. Think about it.